Patricia with a Y. I am the Director of Operations for the Freebird Project, and we're so hugely happy tonight to bring you Nicea Hilton. She is an acupuncturist, and she's a specialist in reproductive issues for women. I'm not sure what the proper term is for it, but it all has to do with our flow and our power, and she's going to help us to understand how to harness the power of that and hopefully not be as looked out by it as some of us sometimes are. So Denicia, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
And we're so excited to have you here because this is really an expertise that all of us as women go through it, but so many of us don't take the time to understand what it is that we're going through.
Right. And you said it perfectly, a lot of them don't, and a lot of us don't take the time to really understand it. And because of not taking the time to truly understand what is going on, that allows us and creates room for others to tell us. And therefore, the power and the authority is out of our hands because now we're only going by what they say, right? So that's really, yes, that's what it's all about, is really getting to know your cycle so that you can regain that power and the authority.
And that sounds pretty awesome. So what are some of the ways that the cycle affects us? Because we know it does. We've heard about PMS and those sorts of things. And I've actually heard that we are more likely to have depression afterwards than before. But that's just one of the things I've heard over the years. But it is something that affects all of us, and it affects us all slightly differently, as I understand it.
Yes, actually, it can be more than slightly different ways. The cycle, and mind you, I'm speaking also from an Eastern medicine standpoint, right? So, in Western medicine, it's a cycle is a cycle, and oh, you may cramp and you may cramp, and they're seen the same. But in Eastern medicine, we see them differently because we're also tying in what are these other symptoms that are coming into play. So, is it the depression before or after the cycle? Or is it depression that's actually around the ovulation time? What is the basal body temp that is going on? Which most who are recording that, they're trying to get pregnant. But we have the cramping. We're not really supposed to be cramping. There's constipation, diarrhea, anger. There's so many different symptoms that because we haven't gotten to know ourselves, right? We have become accustomed to what society says that is normal, but it's really not. We just accepted it as normal. So now we want to get to know by understanding what are those symptoms. Like I said, the bowel movement changes, the urination movements, or patterns, I should say, depression, anxiety, any mood swings, but the mood swings can even vary. So I might have a patient who's more on that anger side, but I'll have another one who's more on the weepy side. And they'll change throughout the cycle when it would present itself. So the idea is that you want to start with day one. That's the best time usually to start when you're going to really track everything. And day one is actually when you need to use something to catch the flow. So some might start day one when they're just spotting, and then it's like, no, that's not really day one, you're spotting. But day one is when you'd actually need to use something, and then you go from there. So I like to say, go in with open eyes, open heart, open uterus, of just observing what is happening. So you want to just observe and track. Right? There are fertility apps. The fertility apps, although you may not be trying to get pregnant or you're trying to not get pregnant, those tend to be the ones that have more details. So they actually have more ability for you to actually track more symptoms and whatnot there. So I have some that I like and I recommend, but there are other ones. Actually, the number one app category is actually period trackers when it comes to the stores, because I know that we have a lot of information that we're going to track. But those that are fertility related, those are usually the best ones to use because they keep track of a lot of symptoms. So you'll just plug those in, say it's this, it's that. Don't analyze it during the first month. Just put it in there. And over time, you'll start to see a pattern. And then from that pattern is where you can see potentially where, say, estrogen is too high, progesterone is too high, or maybe you're not getting enough estrogen, or maybe you're not getting enough progesterone, or the second half of the cycle is a little bit too short. So that's when you get that information. But you'd have to first start with making the observations and tracking it.
So it's sort of like a budget. You have to figure out where the money's going or how you're feeling in this case before you can start to do anything about it. You have to have that time of observation so you know what happens in your so-called natural mode without trying to affect it or trying to analyze or judge it. It just is what it is. And for that first month, you're just taking down the details.
Yes, exactly. And now I will say that there's some stuff that I recommend that people do actually take note of that the trackers don't usually have, because they're basing it mostly on physical symptoms. But even taking note of those instances where you are seeing a pattern where you might be having difficulty of letting things go, or you may have you're spending a lot of time analyzing, should I go this way or should I go that way? Which way is better for me at this time? Or if you're spending a lot of time even thinking, okay, you know what? I'm finding that I'm booking myself for social engagements more right now. So even those are very subtle signs of where you are during your cycle. And when you get to know those, then you can use that to your advantage, right? That's a part of the harnessing the power part. Yes. So and that's how you can, once you get that information, you can use it, right? So here's an example. Huge example that I realized that I was doing by accident. And it was actually someone that I was guest on her show. She actually pointed it out to me, or she was a guest on mine. And I was like, wait a second, I do that. And I didn't realize that I was doing it. But when you're ovulating, remember that ovulation, our natural basic instinct is that we want to attract our mate. So our body starts changing in subtle ways to become more attractive and more charming. And so that is the best time to make those appointments for presentations, to make those pitches that you are trying to get something out of it. Like, those are the best times to do that, because you're naturally more free, you're wanting to talk, you're going to sell, right? And subconsciously, they're buying into you even more, because that is a perfect time. But go ahead.
I was going to say, so there you have it. Book your presentations for when you're ovulating, and that's one way to harness the power of your cycle.
Exactly. And then imagine it's recorded, right? So then you're like, yes, I could just use this, and I will ovulate all throughout the month. No. But that's one way, like that. And then another way that maybe not so open, but so the opposite side of that cycle, from ovulation being right in the middle, then you go to right at the beginning. So that's when you're actually bleeding at that time. You're actively on your cycle. That time is usually the time that we want to just go inwards. We want to be a little bit more quiet into ourselves. And what I have observed is that the irritation that comes about is actually because we're pushing ourselves to continue and to be outward, because we may have to go to work, or we might have families to take care of. And so we're constantly pushing ourselves during that time. So you're presenting an inner conflict. And that inner conflict manifests as frustration. And then people identify that, oh, she must be on the rag. I think it really is just a conflict. Like, you want to go inward. So on a day-to-day basis, right? Maybe you can plan it where if you see your schedule, your partner's schedule, or your kid's schedule is going to be a lot during that time, then maybe lean more on that partner, or maybe lean more on that carpool or the other groups that you're involved in that could possibly take some of the load off of you, and they can perform some of those actions and tasks while you can take the time for yourself to just kind of be and do it unapologetically and do it guilt-free, because it's just temporary, but it's that time that you just want to go inward and just really take care of yourself and just let everything kind of clear.
Awesome. And so is there anything that we can be doing in general with our diet or with our, vitamins and so on that makes our cycle easier to bear or easier to go through?
Yeah, so this is where things get tricky. And I say tricky in the sense that there is a lot of information out there that makes it seem like anybody can do this and anybody can do that, and then they're going to have a better cycle, right? Once again, coming from Eastern medicine standpoint, where we look at everyone individually, this is one of those instances when I say you're going to take the data that you observed, right, and see what patterns might stick out. So if you tend to be more on that cold side, like you need heat in order to get the cramps away, then like a ginger brewed tea might be really good for you, right? You don't want to have like any yogurts or ice creams before your cycle is supposed to start, because those are all introducing more cold. And therefore, introducing more cold can make the cramps worse when your cycle actually starts. Not to mention, too, swimming. So that's also an external cold and introduction of cold. Or this doesn't happen here in Florida, but those places where there's snow, the skiing and playing around and just laying in the snow, you're introducing more external cold. Also, with the foods that are high in sugar, you want to avoid those because the sugar can actually cause activate the inflammatory process. So that can make cramping worse. Now, there is one, and I say it's an exception, but it's not really an exception, and that's dark chocolate, right? Dark chocolate, and I say dark because it needs to be 70% or higher. When you get to that level, it's not really sweet because raw cocoa is actually bitter. So most think, oh, I can just have chocolate and it'll make it better. Well, if you're getting milk chocolate, it's a lot of sugar and that can make the cramping worse. But if it's dark chocolate, it's bitter, but they actually have compounds in there that can calm the prostaglandins down, that can cause the cramps to go down. So that's another way. And
there you have it. Dark chocolate is good, but it has to be the dark stuff, not the milk chocolate, not the stuff you get from the candy store, the convenience store. It has to be the good stuff.
Yes, and then if anybody questions you on why are you spending that much on chocolate, you say it's quality and it's for my period. They'll be like, oh, okay, great. Do that.
And whether they accept it or not does not matter. You're getting the chocolate for yourself and you're taking care of yourself, which is what this is about, right? And it is
totally.
So there are some things that you said that you can expect from week to week that we go on as we go through the cycle. There's different things that we can expect at different times.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Do you want to take a little journey and walk with me on that?
I would love to.
Okay, let's do it. So, okay, we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna start with day one, and day one being when you actually need to use something to catch the flow, right? So our cycle is split into 4 weeks, and that is going to be on a smaller scale because we're also looking at the month to month is on a bigger scale of the year. Okay, so the seasons change and whatnot, our cycles change too. So right now we're going to stick within the month, and we're going to start with week 1. And week 1 is that time that can be considered a renewal time, because guess what's happening? You're shedding all of this old stuff physically, and then that's the time that when you're going inward and you're assessing what's going on in your life at this time. You're thinking about what is serving me to my highest good and what isn't so much. And now I know that, so I can freely just let that go. And you're going to just kind of be there in the moment. Then you should not have any cramping. If you do have cramping, that means that the uterus is just working really hard to push and expel out the old lining. And sometimes when that happens, it may not actually get everything out. So sometimes there might be a vaginal steaming that might be recommended. And in that case, you would do that before your cycle. You don't ever steam while you're on your cycle itself. Next, as you move on through that phase, we say to expect 3 to 5 days. Anything short is considered a short cycle. Anything longer is considered a long cycle. So we look for that, and 3 to 5 days should be your norm as far as the number of days that you're actively flowing. Next up is, as you move on, you're going to go into week 2. So week 2 is a time where everything's starting to look really bright and shiny and so lovely, because we're building the lining again. So we're physically building the lining, but now we're getting to really put together ideas, and this is when our creativity starts to really pump up, and it ramps and it ramps and it ramps. So if there's any ideas that come to you, your creative juices are flowing, and you just want to get it all out. You're like, oh, this is so great. And you just start writing things out, or you're finding that you're really enjoying that creative process. This is a perfect time to do that, because everything is building itself. And so as you keep going, and this is physically the time as you're getting ready for ovulation. So the body is starting to get ready to conceive, right? And therefore, when it comes to ideas, you're getting ready to conceive ideas. Okay, so that's also the time where you might find that you are wanting to go out more, and starting to see more people, just being outside of yourself. This is the time when that starts to really manifest itself. And then I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and then talk about the seasons that I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
As you're actively bleeding, that is considered the springtime. So that is the time, like I said, with your renewal. So just like spring is when we start seeing everything coming by, it looks so pretty and everything else. And then week 2 is when we move into that summertime. So during the summertime, what happens? Everyone wants to be outdoors. And everybody wants to find something to do, like calendars get booked. So that's exactly what you're going to do during that time of your cycle, during week 2. So then we move to week 3, all time. Okay, so week 3 is just after ovulation. So this is just after the whole, I'm being out there, I'm doing my sales pitches, I'm launching my courses, I'm doing all of this, right? And then week 3 comes, and now it says, we're going to slow down, go inward, and let's start assessing what's going on, right? So now I'm going to start picking and looking at lists and analyzing just a little bit more. So that time, they want to say, why is she acting like that? Like, right? You start nitpicking a lot, right? Because you're supposed to. You're starting to go in, and you're starting to say, what do I need? What don't I need? Because it's almost like the body's getting ready for hibernation of the winter. So our hibernation of the winter is week 4. So that is winter time is a time where you go most inward. So you start out with the nitpicking and you're like, I don't really want that anymore. Oh, I want this though, because you're just getting ready for the winter time. And now week 4 comes and it's like, I have what I need. Now I'm just going to be to myself. Don't want to be bothered, right? This is the time when when you would have taken that idea from week 1,
Mm-hmm.
and then you started about it, and then you started analyzing it, right? So now you're fine tuning it. This is the time to really fine tune it, because now you're focused so inward that you don't want to be distracted by outside interference. So now we're going to just sit there and we're going to take it apart, really take it apart. But you want to be careful not to overdo it, right? Because if we stay and pick apart, we're stuck in analysis paralysis. So those who have difficulty letting things go sometimes actually have cycles that start much later.
Mm.
Right? So sometimes when I have those people come in and I meet them, and I'm like, okay, how many days is it? And then they say it's like 35, 40 days. It's already too long. I'm thinking of a lot of things, but then I do question, what are you not easily letting go of? Because that's to prepare you to start over in week 1 when things start shedding and letting go.
And so it all goes with the flow of the seasons
Yes.
and so we really have about one really, really productive week that we can expect that creativity is really popping and everything's really.
Yeah, well, I sometimes consider even the latter part of week 1, like as my cycle starts to end, I'll even notice that, okay, now I'm more focused.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've become laser focused on things. And so I even take advantage of that time. And then I just kind of ride it as long as I can. And then I'm like, what can I put in this time frame? And then all of a sudden, like by the time it hits like week 4, I'm going, let's just, oh bless you. So then it's like, I'm just ready to, boom, just like crash, don't want to be bothered. So you can take advantage of it. When you make those observations of what happens during your cycle, you would have a much better idea of what weeks are like exactly, and like what part of the weeks, because you can try to push yourself and stretch yourself if you can, but then to kind of know what to prepare yourself for, so that you may plan a meeting towards the beginning of a week, but maybe towards the end of another if you can't move it around as freely. But yeah, like you can schedule out things accordingly.
And that's what it's all about, harnessing the power so that you aware, because when we're aware of what's going on outside of us, or rather inside of us, we can use it to help control what's outside of us to some extent. Of course, we can't control the world or the weather, but there are things that we can do within ourselves to help make things flow a little smoother in the day-to-day life and in our business life too, because it is difficult if you know that you are going to be cranky and not the nicest person to be around. That's probably not when you want to be meeting that big wig or that next prime prospect, really.
Right, exactly. And you know what you're saying with the outside, no, we cannot change the outside, right? So that's the beauty of this, is that you are learning more about your inside so that you can respond versus react to, so it gives us that, like, oh, I have the power to take that pause, and now I can assess, I can think through, I know where my strengths are during this time period of the month, and then I can move forward versus a quick snap, habitual, like reaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we react a lot out of habit, who set the habit? Who formed that habit? Was it you, or did it come from just outside sources, and we didn't realize it, we didn't know it. So that's why I say, even when it relates to the period and to the cycle, the whole, oh, you might cramp and then here, just take this pill, you know, that's just giving another tool the power, because you're not truly understanding what is going on, why it is that you're cramping, what can you do, what can you adjust in your lifestyle, right? Like, should I stop smoking? Oh my gosh, when I stopped smoking for this long, my periods were much better. Or I wasn't exercising as hard, my periods got better, or my period came back. So there are those lifestyle changes that happen, that because you're more aware of yourself, you can make those decisions and just take that back into your hands, rather than some marketing ad or some pharmaceutical company saying this is what you do and just move on. But no, that's not, that's not really the case. So it comes right back to you.
Absolutely. And one question I did have for you too is there truth to the fact that the more natural ways of controlling the flow, like the moon cups and so on, are those better for us than some of the disposable items on the market?
When it comes to cups, it's definitely a personal preference, because you would be extremely intimate with yourself, and some are not comfortable with that. The pros and advantages of using the cups is that they are reusable, and that because you can wash them and you would store them until you need them again. And the not so great things about them is that you'd have to get adjusted to placement, and then you'd have to get adjusted to what your flow is like. So some who have those very erratic flows, where they could be regular and going along with a lighter flow, and then all of a sudden, boom, really heavy out of nowhere, they might overspill and overfill the cup, but they wouldn't really know that they did. They may have an accident. And I know some who might use a cup and they're still wearing liners or a light pad or something. Now, some of them are using the cups because they know that they have a heavier flow, and then they have the backup pad, versus having to change out so many pads. So once again, that's like a preference. When it comes to pads and tampons, while toxic shock syndrome is somewhat rare, it still occurs. And it's something that I feel like could be totally preventable with education about what is in your tampon. That warning is on that huge sheet of paper that comes in the box, and it's all on the back in the little bitty writing. So they are doing their due diligence, supposedly, and informing us of what could potentially happen by using the tampon. And it's because of all of the chemicals and synthetics that are used, and then you're placing that in a mucosal area. So that area is highly absorbable to whatever you put in there, right? So whatever is in that tampon can go right into your body, because it's just going straight through the mucosal lining, and the body doesn't know any better. So that can happen, and some of those who menstruate have these volatile reactions, and they don't know from what. Like, they could have forgotten the tampon in there, or they really could be sensitive to a chemical that's in that tampon, and just over time they built up, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just, like, they go into this shock. And so you want to be aware of that. Now, there are companies out there that have their answers to that problem. So they have the organic tampons that are free of any of those chemicals. There are herbal pads that are out there that are also 100% cotton, like they may be organic cotton, and they might have herbs infused in there. It's available. I know I personally use a brand that is cotton, like 100% cotton, with 5 herbs in there, and that's it. Like, so there's no parabens, there's no synthetics, there's nothing that's going to cause these odors, no fragrances. I didn't understand why we needed fragrances in pads anyway, but those options are available. So if you are interested in those, then they're there, versus the conventional ones. And actually, this was a conversation I had with someone on Facebook. I think it was yesterday, and it was about cost, right? And I paid $6 for my pads that don't have anything in there. If I was to walk into the store right now, you're paying about $6, sometimes even more, for a pack of the ones that have all the crap in it.
Mm-hmm.
So the prices are actually kind of on par with each other. You just have to find the one that works best for you and then go from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was interested about that one because I'd heard different theories about that before, but I definitely heard about the toxic shock and knowing that that is a consideration when you're dealing with your periods and your flow. You know, and so is there anything out there that you are aware of that lots of women get wrong? What's the biggest myth that women believe about their period that you've discovered? That you're just like, how can you not know that?
I will say this by saying that I didn't know that, but it's that it is okay for you to be cramping. Huge myth. Huge myth. And mind-blowing. When I discovered I wasn't supposed to be cramping, I'm like, wait, what? And I was in school when I learned this. So I was in acupuncture and Oriental medicine school. And no, you're not supposed to be cramping. If you're cramping,
So cramping is a sign that something wrong,
yeah,
something not going right. So if you are experiencing cramping, then that is a sign to try and fix it.
right, exactly. It's just that there's so many different things that can come up as far as why it is that you're cramping, which is the beauty of Eastern medicine, because we're also pulling in those other things to figure out which one it is. But yeah, that's the hugest myth. And because maybe your mom, aunt, grandmother, or whomever it was that taught you about it, they're like, oh, take this Tylenol, take this Aleve, here's some Midol, here's some Pamprin. You know, it's okay, it'll pass. And so you just kind of continue month to month to month to month with these horrible cramps when we're not supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that's quite the shock. I mean, I am one who doesn't, or at least I haven't for most of my life, suffered from them. But I know my mom; it was horrible for her, and it was just horrible. And I was so glad when I grew up and I didn't have to deal with that. Oh, good! I must have got that from Daddy's side. Anyway.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
But yeah, that is something that so with proper care, and is it a acupuncturist that they should be looking for, or who is it that you would be looking for? A reproductive specialist? Who is it that one would look up? Unless, I mean, obviously, if they're where you are, and you are in Florida, right? So if you're in
Yes.
Florida, you go and see Nicea. And if you're somewhere else, you look for a...
You would look for another acupuncturist. And actually, there are some chiropractors that sometimes it's actually an adjustment that might be needed. Also, there are Mayan abdominal massage therapists. Sometimes the cramping can be caused from a structural, but it's actually structure where a ligament might be pulling too tightly than the other, or due to trauma, the uterus might be tilted, so it structurally does not have the room to allow everything to freely flow. So the cramping is trying to push past where that structure is off. Also, you can see a home sauna practitioner. They do vaginal steaming. So sometimes it's a vaginal steam that you might need as well. That will kind of, the herbs and the steam go up through the vagina, through the cervix, and help to actually loosen up the endometrial lining. And it is an indigenous ritual that has been done for years, hundreds of years. And they have said this, that if you cramp, there's a problem. And so they would sit you there for some cultures every day to every other day, for some once a month. they would say you're going to sit here and steam until you have no more cramps, because they saw it as there's something that's not cleaning out and the uterus is overworking and you shouldn't be crimping. So vaginal steaming is another option. There's kinesiologists, applied kinesiologists, that might do more like muscle testing to see if there might be an emotional component that's associated with the irregular cycle. If the cramps are severely debilitating, sometimes really going to go see an OBGYN and getting an ultrasound done. Sometimes they might discover that you might have a fibroid or a cyst might have burst, just depending on the severity of the pain. And so that way you'll have like a baseline of, oh, okay, there's this 1 centimeter fibroid that's there. So if you already see one, then just be really aware that now's the time to take action, to help yourself either to get rid of that one and or prevent more that might start accumulating. Endometriosis is another thing to be on the lookout for. And that one can be really hidden because it takes on average about 5 to 7 years to even get a diagnosis of endometriosis. But it can be severely debilitating. But even then, all of what I listed, especially acupuncturists who practice with herbs as well, can be extremely helpful in at least getting through the symptoms. Because endometriosis is just one that's really difficult to treat because the cells are just kind of everywhere. It's kind of hard to get them out of where they're not supposed to be. So it really just ends up helping more with just care.
Right, and so it will alleviate or lessen some of the symptoms, but it won't necessarily take them all away if it is something like the endometriosis or the fibroids. But in most cases, this is great news, ladies! You're not supposed to be in pain. So this is awesome, awesome news that Denicia brings us today. And then hopefully, for those of you who are out there watching, can take advantage of that knowledge that A, it's not supposed to hurt, B, you can make the best sales when you're ovulating, and C, when it's time to settle down and go inside, don't feel guilty about going inside. Have I covered it there, Denicia?
You sure did. And you know what, for those, I didn't tell you either, but I'm actually getting ready to launch a course. I know that we talked about it and we're just kind of walking through it, but just a mini 4-week course of really helping. I'm going to guide you through that whole getting to know ant flow is what it's called. And so that I'm going to guide you through that week by week process of things that you're going to be observing and then what you're going to be documenting. So if anybody is interested in that, yes, definitely let me know and we could sign up and then we'll get that information to you.
Absolutely. So will they just find you on Sisters of the Flow, your podcast site, or do you have another site that we should send them to?
Yeah, so it's actually sistersofflow.com/course.
Awesome.
COURSE course.
And we'll make sure that we get that into the comment area there so people can find it that way as well. Thank you so much, Denicia, for joining us and for sharing this information with us, because it is so important. I mean, no matter who you are, if you're a woman, you got to deal with this, and you might as well go through it pain-free and to go in a way that honors your body instead of fighting your body. We've learned that a lot through this week with the people that we've been talking to, that a lot of times we are our own worst enemies. So it's time to start being your own best friend and start listening to the body, because it's telling you what you need to know. And again,
thank you so much for having me, and
not
congratulations.
a problem at all. This is neat stuff to know, because we don't talk enough about those things. I mean, we just don't. I mean, it's not something you just sit down and, oh yeah, tell me how it's going. Are you kidding me? And we don't.
No, and my friends, we've gotten used to it, so now we just kind of talk about it, whatever. But we want to open the conversation, and or the flow conversation is what I've been calling it. And you just talk to a cousin, talk to a daughter, talk to your father, because believe it or not, although they say it affects half the population, it affects 100% of the population. The population is birthed out of. So that is some extreme power that we do have. And it's time for all of us to get to know that power and to use that power and regain it and reharness it.
Absolutely. So there you have it from Denicia. Now we are going to be moving into the next session with JJ. JJ is going to take us through how to replace your income, 12 ways to replace your income within a year. So we're going to be heading into that one next. Thanks so much for joining us for the Free to Fly online conference and fashion show, sponsored by the Freebird Project Shop, where your purchase gives others wings. Thanks so much for joining us, and be sure to check out the shop, and we will touch base with you at a later time. Denicia, thanks so much again for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, and congratulations again.
Thank you.